All right, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting for October 18th, 2022 for the town of Truckee. Kaylee, can I have a roll call, please?
Chair Gove.
Present.
Vice Chair Tarnay.
Present.
Commissioner Riley.
Here.
Commissioner Freeman is noted as absent.
All right, now I would like to invite any of you who would like to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next we'll move into public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the commission on items that are not on tonight's agenda. If anybody would like to come up and make any public comment about anything at all other than tonight's agenda, you may do so and approach the podium at this time. Please state your name. You will have 3 minutes. Seeing none, we will close public comment. And then item number 5 is approval of minutes. However, I was absent from the last meeting, would be abstaining from voting, and then that means that we don't have a quorum. So we will push the approval of those minutes into the next Planning Commission meeting. No. Oh, well then, yes.
Can we just fix the spelling of my name on page 5 before the next one, please? Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along, we'll go into agenda item 7, public hearings major review. And on the agenda tonight, we have 7.1 is for application 2021-097 Soaring Ranch Phase 3. And the staff presentation will be done by Laura. And then it's my understanding that the applicant will have a presentation after that. Then we'll move into clarifying questions. So Laura, take it away.
All right. Good evening, commissioners. It says it's on. Okay. Is that better? I'll lean in. Okay, so we're here tonight to talk about Soaring Ranch Phase 3. This is a mixed-use project on Soaring Way in the Jorg Ranch specific plan area. It's a project with 4 buildings. It has a total of 7,834 square feet of retail floor area and 109 multifamily residential units. 91 of those are market rate and 18 are affordable. Here's a location shot of the project site for Soaring Ranch. And then this is the parcel map that was recorded in June 2021 that subdivided the 16-acre parcel into 3 parcels. The one in yellow is the Phase 3 project site, which is 6.06 acres. Some background on the project. As I mentioned, it's within the Jorg Ranch specific plan area. This specific plan was adopted in March 2015. The key concepts were economic diversification, regional business clustering, and open space protection. The zone in the pink there is the regional commercial zone where the project is located. That was designed to fulfill the regional economic cluster vision. And at the time the specific plan was adopted, an EIR was also certified. That included mitigation measures and infrastructure phasing that are required to be implemented as the plan builds out. Since the time of plan adoption, 3 projects have been approved within the plan area. The first was Soaring Ranch in March 2018. That included 3 phases of development on the 16.3 acre parcel. The first phase was the Rayleigh's grocery store with the co-anchor tenant and then the freestanding commercial building. And then phase 2 at the time was anticipated to be 65,000 square feet of retail space. Phase 3 had no uses proposed at that time. Construction of the Rayleigh's and the multi-tenant commercial building has been completed. And then the next project was the Truckee Tahoe Lumber project, also in March 2018. That's on the adjacent parcel. That was a retail showroom and some storage buildings. That one was completed in October 2020. And then in February 2021, the Soaring Ranch Phase 2 project was approved. That was a mixed-use project that had 4 buildings, 31,523 square feet of commercial floor area, and 69 multifamily units. 61 of those were market rate and 8 were affordable. that approval required a development permit amendment to reduce the amount of previously approved retail space and replace the commercial floor area with multifamily units. Plan development amendment to revise the previously approved site plan, a tentative map amendment to modify the previous parcel sizes, use permit for the multifamily residential units, and approval of a 26% density bonus with parking concessions. Building permit for that project was submitted in February and is currently in the plan check process. As the first projects within the specific plan area were being reviewed, some questions were raised about implementation of the plan versus what the community's expectations were when the plan was developed. In February 2021, the council directed staff to pursue some amendments to the specific plan. The first phase was to address immediate questions about the plan's housing requirements and inconsistencies in the original specific plan. And then phase 2 was the bigger picture questions about the goals and visions of the plan. And that was anticipated to occur in tandem with the 2040 general plan update. The phase 1 amendments were approved by the council in June 2021. Under the state law, a developer can submit a preliminary housing development application, and that basically locks in the standards that are in place for a housing project, including the zoning, design, subdivision, and fee requirements as of the date the preliminary application is submitted. So the developer submitted a preliminary housing development application on March 1st and a formal land use entitlement application on August 2nd, 2021. We reviewed those and determined that it complied with the state law, and that means that the project was vested at the time that the preliminary application was submitted on March 1st. So that includes the March 2015 Jorg Ranch specific plan, the 2025 general plan, and the development code that was in effect on January 7th, 2021. So just a couple of things to remember about the original specific plan. The workforce housing requirements included setting aside a 4-acre parcel on Martis Drive. That was really envisioned to be the primary workforce housing location for the specific plan. The plan said that if building permits for any square footage that brought the development total to 181,645 square feet, if it would exceed that number, then those would be prohibited from being issued until the foundations were installed for the workforce units on the RMW20 parcel. So this table in the corner here shows the calculations for the square footages for the phase 1 project, Truckee Tahoe Lumber, what's proposed in phases 2 and 3, which brings that total to 144,435 square feet, which is less than that trigger that would require construction of the RMW parcel. And as an additional reminder, the 2015 specific plan did not require any inclusionary housing for projects within the plan area. So that brings us to the proposed project. So the entitlements that are requested for phase 3 are a development permit based on the size of the project and number of multifamily units, a plan development amendment to revise the overall site plan and integrate the phase 3 development, a use permit for the multifamily uses in the CR zoning district, along with an accessory daycare amenity for the residents, and a zoning clearance to permit the 7,834 square feet of retail space. The applicant is requesting approval of a 50% density bonus to increase the allowed number of residential units from 73 to 109, with 18 of those as affordable housing units. And through the density bonus, parking reductions and concessions are requested that would modify the private exterior space and infrastructure requirements. This is just a brief overview of the project timeline. Again, the project formal application was submitted in August, deemed complete in November. Then the traffic study and environmental review were completed. We scheduled a hearing in August and prepared the staff report and draft resolution. We continued that hearing at the request of the applicant. And then September 1st, we received a revised affordable housing plan that had density bonus concession requests. For the September hearing that we scheduled, we published a memo talking about those requests and then published the August staff report that had been prepared. We continued that hearing as well at the applicant's request. And then in early October, the applicant team provided some additional information on the density bonus concessions. And that brings us to tonight's hearing. We published a memo summarizing the current staff recommendation and changes to the resolution that we're recommending tonight. So I'll do a quick overview of the proposed project. The applicant team is going to be doing a more in-depth presentation on the design. So here you can see what was approved with the overall Soaring Ranch site plan with phases 1 and 2 of development. And you can see that the piece here had no uses anticipated at that time. So then you can see on the current site plan how the phase 3 project would relate to the first and second phases of development. And this is just a closer up view showing the footprints and other site elements. Here we have some of the building elevations and some renderings that were prepared by the applicant team. And this shows the aerial view of the project looking from Soaring, and then also a view that the applicant team put together showing the view from 267. So one of the items that was discussed in the staff report was that a few of the materials staff didn't think were consistent with the phases 1 and 2 materials. We originally proposed a condition that would just require the materials to be consistent so that the project would have a cohesive look and that the larger buildings that are proposed in phase 3 would blend in. The applicant team asked us to add some more clarifying language to that condition to make it more clear when they come in for building permits which changes are being approved tonight. So this condition with the new language is included in the current draft resolution. The affordable housing plan for the project was prepared by the applicant team. As I mentioned earlier, inclusionary housing is not required, but an applicant can request or they can propose affordability in order to comply with the state requirements for a density bonus. So what the applicant is proposing is the density of 12 dwelling units per acre would allow 73 units. They're proposing to restrict 24% of those to qualify for the 50% density bonus, which would allow 37 additional market rate units to be constructed. And that would result in a total of 109 units, 91 market rate, and 18 affordable. So those requirements are included in the draft resolution. The applicant's proposing 188 parking spaces. That includes parking for the retail uses that complies with the development code requirements, and then multifamily residential parking that complies with the state parking reductions for a density bonus project. So under the density bonus law, the review authority is required to reduce the off-street parking to 1 off-street space for each studio or 1 bedroom unit and 1.5 off-street spaces for each 2 or 3 bedroom unit with no guest parking required. Those can be provided through tandem parking or uncovered parking, and the off-street parking requirements apply to the entire project, including any market rate units. So those calculations from the staff report are shown in the table below. In reviewing the project, we determined that the project would qualify for up to 3 density bonus concessions under the state law, in addition to those parking reductions. The applicants requested 2 concessions as part of the proposed project. They've asked to waive the private exterior space requirements for 11 of the second-story residential units due to the fact that the balconies would conflict with the first floor design elements on those portions of the buildings, and then to remove the requirement to construct or provide additional funding for a roundabout at the Highway 267 Brockway Road Soaring Way intersection. One of the requirements to be eligible for concessions and incentives is that the concession would result in identifiable financial sufficient and/or cost reductions. So the memo that the applicant team prepared on October 5th and sent to us explained how the 2 requested density bonus concessions would result in those kind of cost reductions. After reviewing that, it's our opinion that the necessary information to support approval of the concessions has been provided and that the findings can be made. So the draft resolution now includes some modifications to the original conditions. The numbering has changed, as I noted in the Planning Commission memo, so it's now 78 and 92 are the condition numbers. But those address the balcony requirements and removal of the condition about the infrastructure requirements. And I just wanted to note that in order to deny a density bonus concession, the burden of proof is on the review authority to provide substantial evidence that the findings to deny the concession can be made. And we do not believe that any of those findings could be made in this case. In addition to the density bonus concession revisions in the resolution, we also made some other modifications based on our discussions with the applicant team. And those are really to clarify the town requirements and remove any conditions that no longer apply to the Phase 3 project. So those are all included in your draft resolution. We've determined that no additional environmental review is required for this project. The EIR that was prepared for the specific plan identified a range of impacts and required mitigation measures. We did hire an environmental consultant to prepare a supplemental checklist and analyze any new impacts that would be created by the project. And the consultant found that any impacts had been addressed, so we did not need to do any additional environmental review. So to help guide your discussion tonight, we came up with a couple of major discussion topics. The first is the project consistent with the objective standards of the 2015 Georgia Ranch Specific Plan, the 2025 General Plan, and the January 7th, 2021 Development Code? And have all compatibility issues for the proposed uses been addressed through the draft conditions of approval? So because this is a housing project, under state law, the review is limited to objective standards. I just wanted to remind everyone of that. And the Commission does have discretion to modify, add or delete recommended conditions if you think that's necessary to make the required findings. So our recommendation this evening is to adopt Resolution 2022-12, determining the project consistent with the 2015 Georgia Ranch Specific Plan, thereby precluding any further environmental review consistent with CEQA, and approving the development permit, plan development amendment, use permit, and zoning clearance based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. Alternate actions the Commission could take would be to continue the hearing to a date and time certain. You could add, delete, or modify the proposed conditions of approval. You could deny the project if you find that the required findings can't be made, and you can require additional environmental review. Our 10-day appeal period, if you take action tonight, would end on October 28th, 2022 at 5:00 p.m.
Thanks, Laura. We'll hold off on questions until we'll move into the applicant's presentation, and then we'll have clarifying questions for the applicant and staff.
Oh, there we go. Hi, good evening, Planning Commission, and good evening, staff. I'm Rob Wood. I'm with Millennium Planning and Engineering. I'm here tonight representing the developer JMA. Art Chapman and Rick McConnor here from JMA tonight, and some of our project team is here as well from Dolan Group, Sean Whitaker and John Thatch. I'm going to give a brief presentation basically about how Soaring Ranch Phase 3 fits into the overall project, and then I'm going to turn it over to the architect, and he's going to talk about the architecture and some of the other points of the project. So overall, Soaring Ranch was intentionally designed as a walkable mixed-use community, and Phase 3 completes the overall mixed-use design, resulting in a vibrant community where residents can walk to the various everyday services. There's grocery, there's restaurants, hardware, and other everyday services. Next slide. So the overarching theme of Soaring Ranch is outdoor lifestyle, and I think we've captured that. It includes outdoor dining, it includes the central lawn for a gathering area, a dog park, a couple children's play areas, and extensive bike and trails that have really key connections throughout town. There's between the Class 1 and Class 2 trails, we're providing over 2 miles worth of connections that are key to get over to the regional, the Riverview Sports Park down Jorger, and then go in the other direction. There'll be trails connecting along Brockway Road to 50/50 and then on to the regional park. And then on to downtown Truckee, also along Hope Court. There's trails that connect over to Martis Valley Trail System. So these are really key connections for the trail system. Next slide. The public benefits for this project are significant. I would say the most significant is the workforce housing units. When Jorger Ranch Specific Plan was adopted in 2015, it was anticipated that the need at build out would be, it would generate a need for about 82.6 workforce housing units. This phase alone, phase 3, provides 109 of those units. And between phases 2 and 3, we provide 178 workforce housing units. So these are units geared towards the Truckee residents and Truckee workforce. So that's a huge public benefit. Secondly, more than $9 million in public improvements will have been put in place by Soaring Ranch with all phases, most of which went to the Class 1 and Class 2 bike paths, like I said, over a couple of miles worth of key connections, sidewalk improvements along all the frontage that connect all the intersections. A transit shelter and bus stop was constructed during phase 1, right there on Soaring Way. Multiple EV charging stations have been installed. Significant improvements to a couple different intersections, including the intersection at Jorger and Soaring, which is the roundabout that was constructed during phase 1. And significant improvements at Highway 267 intersection as well. Let's see. And extension of utilities, water, electric, and sewer that could be used not just for this development, but also nearby developments. Next slide. So staff already went over this, so I won't spend a lot of time, but this shows overall how the phases interact with each other. Phase 1, as everybody knows, is built out. That's the commercial center that has Rayleigh's as the hub. Also has Mountain Hardware, Truckee Brewery, Martis Valley Massage, and rumor has it that Rock and Ramen is coming soon to phase 1. So that's built out. Phase 2, as staff indicated, is an approved project. It was approved last year, and it will, it's geared up for construction next year. It's in plan check right now with staff. That included a mixed use design of another 30,000 or so square feet of commercial on the lower floor, and the upper floors with 69 workforce housing units. Phase 3, which is why we're here tonight, has 109 additional workforce housing units and 8,000 square feet of commercial and a daycare. So this is a cool rendering looking from the east side of the site towards the northwest. And you can see how the two phases interact together. To the right is phase 2. You can see the dog park there in front of the building. And beyond that, the community gathering area and children's play area. And you can see the outdoor dining. And then you can see the commercial space on the lower floor, and the upper floors are the residences. And then to the left is the similar type design with commercial on the lower floor and residences above. So overall, phase 3 is about 6 acres, has 188 parking spaces, and consists of the 109 units. 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. More than half of them are the 2-bedroom units. And then some additional commercial space, some more outdoor amenities, and a daycare. So that's pretty much how phase 3 fits into the overall Soaring Ranch. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Whitaker of Dahlin Group. He's going to talk about the architecture and a little bit of the finer points of the project. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob.
You mind going back to that one? Thanks. One more. Perfect. Sean Whitaker with Dahlin Group. I'm a principal. I'd like to also mention John Thatch, who's one of our founders and a Truckee resident. So our 109 workforce housing units are arranged into 4 buildings. Those 4 buildings define and activate the courtyards. I describe the courtyard space as a central courtyard with several periphery courts that you see at the intersections of the ends of the buildings. We were very specific and intentional about creating a strong connection to phase 2 and the public event lawn. There's a cohesive pedestrian loop throughout the courtyard space that connects to the bike trails both sides of each building, the commercial space, and our outdoor amenities. Our landscape design will generally look and feel like the other two phases. So you'll have a cohesive landscape. We included a fire pit, large lawn area, a play structure, relaxation spaces, several patios, bench seating, and bike parking both inside and out. Next slide, please. Every building will have an elevator. All of the units will be adaptable for persons with disabilities, and every unit will include at least one bathtub. There are 5 locations on the project where the buildings step down to a 3-story elevation. That's each side of Building J, each side of Building H, and the southern end of Building I. This is a view from Highway 267, looking at the south side of I and J. It was important to us that the building fit well with its surroundings and that it was buffered with both new and existing trees. Next slide, please. Thanks. This view is from Phase 2, looking back across the event lawn into Phase 3. I'd like to point out the architecture is not identical to, but it's very fitting with, very cohesive with the other phases of the project. The buildings frame and activate the event lawn with their commercial spaces and just with their locations. Next slide, please. Now we're looking at just Phase 3, again at the north side, which contains the commercial space. The buildings have a clearly defined base with a strong horizontal element. That element provides weather protection. The commercial space is heavily glazed and identifiable as commercial space. Those upper floors are highly articulated, meaning ins and outs, which help to break down the scale. With every articulation element, we change material and color, again, breaking down the scale of the elevation. Next slide, please. These shed roof forms are important character definers to the architecture. They're oriented for solar harvesting. So Phase 3 will include PVs, solar panels, and they were thoughtfully oriented to the sun angles. You begin to see some of the character enhancing details, some of the character defining details, which include concrete plinths, steel posts, wood braces and beams. Those braces and beams are evident again at the roof level. Next slide, please. Now a little closer, we see those character defining details again with one of our weather protection elements. Again, plinth, post, brace, beams at the pedestrian level as well as at the roof level. This is one of the periphery courtyards that I mentioned. One more. Phase 3 adds the critical housing element, which is important to any mixed-use community. Next slide, please. The key ingredients for me are desirable commercial tenants, residents, which actually activate these spaces, and then the third I would say are public spaces that are open and used by the public. So these are the best types of communities that I'm seeing now, right? True mixed-use communities, and the residential component is absolutely critical. This is the fuel for the commercial space and the activation, the people who fill these spaces. We're excited about the project. We're very enthusiastic about phases 2 and 3. Thanks for hearing our presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so commissioners, shall we move into clarifying questions for staff? Commissioner Tarnay, would you like to start?
I asked a whole bunch of questions via email, and unfortunately, I'm still not clear on much of this. So I'm just going to jump into the questions. Why is it that the daycare is considered residential square footage?
That's because it's proposed as an amenity for the tenants versus a commercial daycare that would be open to the public.
So do the tenants pay for it?
That might be a question for the applicant team in terms of what they're envisioning. I'm not sure that they know exactly what the programming would be for the daycare, but it would not be open to the public.
I mean, it's not uncommon in multifamily communities that there's a lot of amenities that are included, but that's part of the homeowners association dues. So we
I've
can,
never seen a daycare as part of your homeowners association dues.
well, we can get clarification from the applicant when we move into applicant clarifying questions.
To me, it just seems like it should be commercial square footage. That's why I'm asking that. Because if they're paying for it, then it's a commercial business. That was all. Okay, so this is the really hard question. I don't understand how the Totalic is saying that it's safe to have 109 apartments here, but it's not safe to have 15 children in a daycare.
Yeah, I mean, the way that Totalic is written, when they came up with the densities and intensities that they thought were appropriate in the different airport compatibility zones, one of the things they determined was appropriate in Zone D was high-density residential. They found that a small daycare with 14 or less children would be okay, but they thought that a larger daycare is something that would require additional conditions, like building hardening and things like that, if you're bringing in more people from the outside. And those aren't town requirements. That's something that the airport requirements came up
So
with.
it's a safety concern, though. If you're going to have more than 14 children, it's a safety concern?
Well, there's a few different things that they look at. There's safety, noise, and when we look at projects, we route it to them, and the Nevada County Transportation Commission reviews them, determines if they're consistent with the Totalic, and that's what happened in this case. They provided feedback on what would or wouldn't be consistent with the plan.
And so I'm asking, the building hardening that would be required for a bigger daycare, that is for safety, is that for noise?
I believe it's predominantly safety, but likely noise. What we see throughout the CLUP or the Totalic, sorry, we use those terms interchangeably, is they really focus on density numbers. So there will be a number that's determined to be acceptable from a safety and risk standpoint, and it appears that 14 for a daycare was the acceptable number, and anything beyond that would be too much density for a single use in proximity to the airport. Same with the notion that you would have high density housing where it would be more clustered, leaving larger spaces open. That's really how the CLUP has been structured. We saw something similar with the community center. There was a density limit that was put in place that was higher than normal, recognizing that that was a special use that would have kind of hardened buildings. I'm not sure that we can give you a great answer on why 14 is okay and 15 isn't. We don't have that.
And that's, my question is, if you assume one person per bedroom, 109 units at that rate gives us 196 residents. Why is 196 residents versus 14 children?
I suspect that those residents are spread out in a much larger area versus a daycare, which would be, what's the size of, is it a couple thousand square feet, I'm guessing, all consolidated into one location. That's typically what we've seen within the CLUB. Again, not saying that it makes complete sense, but that's kind of the approach that we've seen.
Yeah, this makes me very uncomfortable. Okay, moving on. I asked you a question, Laura, about the affordable units, and it looked like at one point they were 80% AMI, and then it looked like they are 60% AMI. Is the 60% AMI due to our code? Can we amend that?
So there's a couple of different numbers that come into play with the state density bonus law. The lower income housing project, I sent you that section of the density bonus law that references the Section 8 housing in terms of what qualifies for those units as a lower income household. And then the rents or affordable housing sales prices that can be charged are the 30 to 60% of AMI. So they're two
30%
different.
of 60% of the AMI, but
Yeah, so those are two different numbers. But the 80%, so when we talk about a low-income housing project in our code, we say 80%. If you actually look at what the density bonus law and you follow it through to the different legislation and how they define it, they talk about the Section 8 housing. They say that it's based on those income limits. If the federal government does away with those income limits, then the 80% applies. So it's a little more complicated. It's not as straightforward as just a number in our code. It's all based on state law.
so I'm sorry, is this Section 8 housing as well?
No, it's talking about how those numbers are established for the eligibility. So it's complicated, I guess is the answer. And it's possible that the applicant team who, we have a developer who's done a lot of affordable housing projects and, he may have a better explanation than I do for how that's applied.
Okay, as it's presented to you, what is your understanding of the income restrictions on these units? Is it 60% AMI, is it 80% AMI, or is it Section 8 housing?
It's not Section 8 housing, but you would have to look at what the current income limits are based on that government code section, which is probably more the 80% because that's the default if those specific limits go away.
Okay, but you list one of our development code sections and say that it's 60%. Is that correct?
The density bonus law has the 30% of the 60. That number is also from the density bonus law, and that talks about how much rent you can charge for the units.
Well, that's clear as mud. I am worse off than I was before.
So basically, we're applying state law when it comes to the density bonus units. The qualifying income levels will be based on state law, and then the rents that they charge, it'll all be consistent with what the state allows.
So the state allows people who make 80% of the area median income to qualify and then charges 30% of 60% of the area median income as rent?
That's how the state density bonus law is written, but it's not necessary. They don't specify the 80%. It's based on that government code language.
Wow.
Susie, I reviewed SB 330 today, and they reference that as the income level, in order to qualify for that law.
They reference
As
what?
being 30%, or affordability is 30% of a 60% of AMI. So I believe that the applicant would have to follow that in order to qualify for these bonuses. And obviously they can clarify that. But that's what I took that to mean when I read the 30% of 60%, if that helps.
Can you maybe elaborate on your concern, or are you just confused about what household incomes would and what percent they would be paying?
Sure, I can elaborate on my concerns. My concerns are that I can't pull up the numbers here because it's somewhere in this email that I sent to Laura, but my concerns are that at 60% AMI for the Nevada County area median income, families have to be making a wage that we don't have here. They have to be making $15 or $16 an hour or something like that. And Dairy Queen pays $19 or $20 an hour. And so my concern is that we are getting more of this housing that our workforce does not qualify for. That's my concern.
And I think we are hamstrung by the constraints within density bonus law. And there is likely nothing that we can do unless the developer is amenable to exploring some other income range on this project.
Great. Thank you for letting me clarify my concerns. I appreciate that. And I think that's all I have right now.
Commissioner Riley.
Yeah, I have some questions for staff. First question that came to mind, kind of sparked by Susie, the CLUP or I'm on the advisory board or commission, TTLA, whatever. Yeah, were we supposed to review this, or do we review it after? Like I feel like there was some review that took place that I wasn't a part of, even though I'm supposed to be representing that.
Yeah, the Nevada County Transportation Commission reviewed this for consistency with the club.
Okay, but not, so that board is not reviewing this? Because aren't they supposed to review? No.
No, I mean, NCTC does the reviews on behalf of projects for consistency. So they give us a letter finding that consistency. The stuff that goes to the board is where there's a request to change something in the plan, or if it's a project of a certain size, I think they also take. So like when the rail yard master plan came forward, that one went to the board. But that might also had a modification as part of it. But generally, NCTC does the
Okay.
review.
I appreciate the clarification. I was like, did I miss something? Other question, I had shared a minute ago that I reviewed SB 330 as it relates to this project. And is the town using SB 330 as a guiding piece in the review of this project? In terms of kind of, our hands are tied, we can't really do much because we'll get sued, or we'll have to pay a fine if we try to restrict this project.
Well, I would say we're complying with all the current state laws, so that would include SB 330 and the density bonus law.
Yeah, so my question with that, and I don't know how it pertains to the density bonus law, I did read that if the town or jurisdiction is in compliance with RENA, that there is more availability for oversight or input than they might otherwise be. We're up to date with RENA, correct, with our current housing element?
Are you talking about SB 330 or SB 35?
SB 330.
I think we'd need to review that section of SB 330. It pertains to SB 35, but I'm not.
Yeah, no,
Can't quite remember where in SB
I reviewed it today and highlighted. I can let's see if I wrote a note, but that was something I had noted, kind of in my comprehensive review. So that is out there, I guess. How does the need for a use permit play into our review? Because this wasn't zoned housing, so we're not looking to change the zoning. We do need to approve a use permit because it wasn't zoned housing, it was zoned commercial. How does that play in?
So housing is an allowed use in the CR zone. It's conditionally allowed. It's not an outright permitted use, which is why the use permit's required.
Yeah.
So what makes it a little tricky, which is what we found with the phase 2 project, in terms of what you can base your review on, is really those objective standards. And the original specific plan didn't have a lot of objective standards because that wasn't a thing at the time.
Right.
So when we went back and amended the plan, we made a big effort to fix that. But because this is vested under the original plan, there's not a whole lot of objective standards in that plan.
And how does the use permit those findings tie into the specific plan? What findings would we need to make that would be objective in the town's opinion?
Laura, maybe just an example. So residential uses have to have a 45 decibel interior noise level. And you have other noisier uses kind of surrounding this site, like Truckee tall lumber. So one of the things we would look at is to make sure that the construction they're proposing would meet that objective design standard. It has to have that interior threshold for noise. If, for example, they couldn't demonstrate that, then one of the things you could talk about it as a commission with the findings is about the compatibility of uses. Hey, there's a residential use next to an industrial use. We would like to understand the compatibility of those two uses. That's really what the use permits come down to, is that level of compatibility.
Okay, I appreciate that. I was reading through the standards with the specific plan. It said like 1 to 2 story massing, blank unarticulated building facades are not supported. Is that objective? Is that subjective?
There's a lot of guidelines, which are subjective, and very few standards, which are objective in the original specific plan.
So the standards would be building height, site coverage, things like that. But as always with housing projects, they can ask for waivers or concessions also.
Right, okay. Let's see if I have any other. Do we have the ability to, as a condition of approval, change the lease agreements for the project? Or would we need to get the project applicant to approve that?
In terms of restrictions?
Yeah,
on the
so in the staff report or in their piece, they say for the market rate units, they would have a 6-month lease agreement. They would have a no less than 31-day sublease. Because there's this, the applicant made all these references to this being a workforce housing project over and over, locals housing. I'd kind of want to put their feet to the fire and really make it a workforce housing / locals housing project by at least at the minimum, making a 12-month lease requirement or making it, required renters must work in the TTUSD boundaries such as some other projects. So is that in our purview or is that something we would have to, like as a condition of approval, or would the applicant have to agree to that?
I mean, my suggestion is that you ask that question to the applicant about the reasoning for the 6 months and how that fits in with the way the project's been described in front of you tonight.
Right.
And then we can go from there.
Okay. But in your staff, is that a condition of approval? Is that a lawful condition of approval?
No, unfortunately. I mean, I understand the interest there, but I do know that the Planning Commission in the past has asked applicants to be very clear and explicit about what their project description is so that you as a commission know what you're approving.
Right.
So I think if your understanding is that this is not a workforce housing project by your definition, you would want to identify that in whatever findings you make for the project.
Okay, I appreciate that. Good. I'm trying to kind of hash some stuff out here clearly. And then is JMA contributing any amount to the 267 Brockway roundabout, or has this concession eliminated that any contribution?
So they're required to pay traffic impact fees, just like every other development project in town. The roundabout contribution was to basically put money towards the upfront costs and then get paid back over time. So that was separate from the traffic impact fee requirements.
Okay. And then with regards to the workforce housing and the the RMW parcel, and kind of you guys showed the chart earlier. I wasn't on the commission at that time, or maybe I guess the council was the one to make the ultimate decision. There was a separation of the square footage of the commercial and the residential. Why is that?
So in the original specific plan, it talked about the floor area, and the calculation when you look at FIRs typically does not include residential. So the way the original plan was written would apply to commercial square footage and had that 181,000. When we revised the plan in June 2021, we tried to clarify that it should include all development and that what the correct number should be, but none of that applies to this project.
Okay. And so, again, back to the Planning Commission's purview, because there is a clear policy in the Sugar Ranch specific plan that requires 50% of the jobs created would have associated housing. Does that hold any water, or is that subjective?
So there was the 40% requirement, and then that was used to calculate what each zoning district's requirement was,
Right.
which is how they came up with the number to put in place the trigger for the RMW parcel. Since what we've seen with Soaring Ranch is that the amount of commercial that was originally envisioned didn't build out or isn't proposed to build out the same way, it's not going to hit that threshold that was originally anticipated.
Right, but there is a policy in the specific plan about creating the housing or ensuring that the housing is created.
Right, and that's related to the building of the RMW parcel. But at
Yeah.
the time, also, 72 to 80 units were proposed as market rate housing on the RMW piece. And instead, what JMA is building is significantly more housing than that, market rate and some affordable. It's just in a different location within the specific plan. I suppose you could look at it that way.
So the staff's perspective is that the housing that JMA has proposed in phase 2 and phase 3 is taking the place of what was envisioned as workforce housing on RMW.
Not necessarily taking the place, because that requirement is still in place to build the RMW. So a future project will hit that trigger, and then that piece will get built.
Yeah, I guess my concern or question is how service industry jobs like Rayleigh's and the other, Mountain Hardware, where I know a majority of people are commuting from Reno. I've interviewed some of the people at Rayleigh's. They don't live here. They can't afford to live here. So I'm not sure that market rate housing in phase 2 or phase 3 will actually address those needs that exist today. But
Yeah,
that's
and I think it's important to remember that the RMW piece was intended to be market rate housing. So at the time the plan was developed, that was thought that would fill that need.
okay. I don't think I was clear on that, so I appreciate the clarification.
So those units are smaller units, market rate, and with restrictions related to short-term rentals.
The RMW.
The RMW, yeah, not the units that we're contemplating within Soaring Ranch. So the idea back in 2015, and you can certainly chime in, is that we were looking at an experimental approach to trying to find market rate housing with some limitations that would generally get at, this was sort of pre-Coburn,
Yeah.
where it would provide, small units for the workforce that would be generated throughout the entirety of the Jorga Ranch specific plan. And again, between 72 and 80 units. The units that we're seeing coming out of Soaring Ranch weren't really even contemplated at that time. We didn't foresee that this would be largely a housing project. It was predominantly within Parcel 4.
Right. I was not on the planning commission side, but more on the working with the representatives of the property owners and recognize that, yes, this was never intended to be a housing development. If it was, we wouldn't have gotten rid of the inclusionary housing policy, and we, probably would have approached this very differently. So I look at this as a, hindsight 2020, but I also look at this as kind of a harbinger of what's to come as part of this general plan process. But I'm done with my questions, at least for staff.
Hey, I discovered a small patch, but if you want to go first, I can wait.
Go right ahead, Susie.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the roundabout issue. Oh, good. So this roundabout contribution was not part of the traffic impact fee. So how was that set up? Is that part of like the development agreement? Is this was something they knew about before right now, obviously?
Yeah, good question. So that's, it's originally identified in the specific plan. It's identified as a private fair share funding agreement between all of the parcels within the Jorga Ranch specific plan. The applicant is identified that as a concession item for the project because the project itself, besides the specific plan requirement for a fair share funding agreement, the project itself doesn't actually trigger the roundabout at that intersection. It stays below level service thresholds at 267 Brockway Soaring. So the project isn't triggering a level of service threshold. And so really it's just tying back to the specific plan requirement for the funding agreement. And so the concession, justification for the concession is that they're already contributing roughly $2.6 million in traffic impact fees as part of phase 1, 2, and 3 towards the traffic impact fee program, which will ultimately go to fund the roundabout at that intersection. And really the fair share funding agreement it's a fronting of the funds to build the roundabout with a reimbursement from the traffic impact fee program. Does that make sense?
So they are still paying the required amount into that roundabout.
They're paying their required amount into the traffic impact fee program, which will ultimately go to fund the improvements at that intersection. What they're asking for a concession for is the fronting of the funds to build that roundabout on likely a quicker pace than what will be pursued by the town to construct the same roundabout.
But the traffic impact fee is a fee in advance of construction as well. What's the difference there?
The traffic impact fee is required of all development within the town to fund the traffic impact fee program. So any type of development, residential, commercial, their fees are developed based on the square footage of the uses. So that those funds are required from the development and every development within town. The fair share funding agreement that was identified in the specific plan kind of noticed that there might be a difference in scheduling of constructing that roundabout based on town priorities on capital improvement projects and traffic impact fee program funds, to where there was an interest to get those funds in advance to build that roundabout on a quicker timeline and then reimburse really all of the Georgia Ranch specific plan parcels from the traffic impact fee program over a period of time.
And have the other parcels that are developed already paid into that?
No, they have not.
Okay, and then I'm reading the page you sent us, this is back to Danielle, about density bonuses. And it talks here about a waiver or reduction of development standards. Has infrastructure improvements or requirements ever been considered development standards?
I mean, I will say that we haven't had that many requests for waivers at this point. So I think the threshold for a waiver really comes back to the affordability of the project. So that's why it's being requested, is that's one of the ways that this project can be financially feasible.
So what if they requested a waiver and they didn't want to pave their roads? That's an infrastructure improvement, and we wouldn't allow that, correct?
I would say the fine difference is that there's sort of a life safety component that, like, for example, they didn't want to remove snow from the property at all. As you know, a condition of approval, we said you have to remove your snow from your parking lots and walkways so that your tenants can get to their spaces. And they said, we can't afford to pay for snow removal. That's a life safety issue, as are paving a road to actually get to the site or get to your unit. So it's a different standard. I guess that's the best way to explain it.
I'll take it one further. So they're not actually requesting to not provide funding towards the required infrastructure improvements. The traffic impact fee fees that we're collecting as part of the development are actually the fees that, or the funds that will go to construct and fund that roundabout in the future. What they're asking for a concession on is paying their traffic impact fees. That's a separate portion. And then the concession is fronting their portion of that roundabout in addition, where they've already, their argument is that they've already paid traffic impact fees, or they will prior to building permit issuance. And this additional condition was to require them to pay an additional frontage of money, and they get paid back over time. So they're still paying for their infrastructure improvements through the traffic impact fee program. They're just not paying again to front the money to then get paid back.
Okay, and then I think one final question on this. We've talked a lot about what it's required, it would cause a public health or safety problem. Also, again, on this sheet that you sent us about the density bonuses, it talks about causing an environmental problem. So is this, would this make it so that it's harder to build that roundabout, which then creates more greenhouse gas emissions, because roundabouts create less greenhouse gas emissions than traffic signals?
We clarify the question as far as, would this make it more difficult to build the roundabout or cause more greenhouse gas emissions?
I'm asking if this would cause an environmental problem of more greenhouse gas emissions than if they paid it as they agreed to in the specific plan in advance and created that roundabout sooner.
I mean, I kind of feel like the short answer is that the likelihood the roundabout would be built at the same time regardless. So, I mean, it's not being triggered at this point by this project, which is sort of bullet number one to focus on, that their project does not bump above the threshold where it would be required for them to construct prior to issuance of their building permit. So I don't think that that's an issue.
Okay, and then I just have, this is the last question, I swear. This does not in any way place a heavier burden on future properties.
No. So the fair share contribution is based on trip generation of the square footage of the uses on each property versus the total cost of the roundabout improvements. So, no, if that answers your question.
I'll take the no. Thank you.
Well, Susie, thanks for getting most of my questions answered. I do have some follow-up questions about the roundabout and the couple other things. So in the final EIR report for the Jorga Ranch specific plan, mitigation measure 3.11-1E, following the recordation of phase 1 map, totaling 4 or fewer parcels, but prior to any further parcel subdivision or issuance of any grading or building permits on the project site, the project proponent shall construct improvements to the State Route 267 Brockway Road Soaring Way intersection as identified in the general plan table CIR-5, which indicates construction of a roundabout or additional through and turning lanes. The construction of additional through and turning lanes may be allowed as an interim improvement if the project proponent can demonstrate the satisfaction of the town that the additional through and turning lanes would be substantially less costly than the construction of a roundabout and would achieve an acceptable level of service at this intersection. Dual left lanes would not be allowed. So is that mitigation measure considered satisfied at this point or no?
Yes, that was satisfied as part of Soaring Ranch Phase 1.
Got it. Okay, great. And so it would be a future project that would then trigger the construction of the roundabout. That's correct?
That's correct.
And just for clarification, what I think I heard you just tell Commissioner Tarnay was that it would not adversely impact a future developer or property owner because the way the fair share agreement is written, that it is structured off of how big their project is per se. And would you anticipate that a future project would then be have to participate in that fair share agreement, or would they be able to get out of it too?
I think that it would be staff's recommendation to implement that condition as it was originally written for this project prior to the request for the concession for future projects.
Okay, and is that because the fact that the town wouldn't have the money to do it and they would need to get that?
No, that's the fact of if another project was coming through that wasn't that a concession wasn't available for that project, they likely couldn't request that the town not require that as a condition.
Right. Okay. So you would expect then that the next developer would probably participate in that fair share agreement only the percentage of their project. Okay.
That's our expectation. Yep.
Okay. And as far as capital improvement projects, is there any plan on getting this going before it's triggered, or we're waiting until that event happens?
There's funding currently in the 5-year CIP for that roundabout to start planning and design. There's funding in this fiscal year to start planning and design. So the intent would likely be to, assuming that workloads and schedules with other CIPs work out, starting probably spring of next year, working towards obtaining a consultant to move forward with that.
Got it. Okay. I have some other questions. Give me a second.
But it would also need to be funded by council as part of the CIP, correct? It's not currently funded.
There is funding.
For full build out?
No, just for
design
planning and design
Okay,
currently.
right.
Thanks for clarifying.
While you're looking, can I ask a quick question?
Fire away.
And that is currently planned to be a double lane roundabout, correct?
Likely, yes. And I'll take that one step further. So ultimately, it's on Caltrans right of way. So it would be likely a joint effort between the town and Caltrans to determine what the roundabout should look like at that intersection, and ultimately Caltrans would need to approve any roundabout designs at that intersection.
I ask because the Nevada County spoke up at the general plan update and recommended against a double lane roundabout there.
Okay, so now I have a question about what was submitted back in March, because I think the staff report indicated that they had a submittal back in March, and then refers to Government Code Section 65941.1. And where'd that go? And then in 65941.1, an applicant for a housing development project as defined in paragraph 3 of subdivision. Anyways, it says there's some very specific items that they have to have had put into their application. And number 3 says a site plan showing the location on the property, elevations showing design, color, and material, and the massing, height, and approximate square footage of each building that is to be occupied. But then in the applicant, or in the application here, it looks like the drawings for the elevations and stuff are dated August of this year. So was that in the March submittal?
I'd have to go back and look at the submittal for the preliminary application to see what exactly was submitted, because the plans that you're looking at were part of the formal application submittal, not the preliminary one. I can take a look if you give me a minute.
Sure.
I have a quick question that they might be able to answer. Is there a 50-foot height limit on this project because of the zoning, the CR? Not to take Laura away from what you
yeah,
were
I
looking for.
believe-
I thought maybe one of the, like Danielle or Jenna could.
Yeah, I'll just double check.
Okay.
You think so?
Yeah. I figured I would maximize time.
Yeah, CR is 50.
And I didn't check like elevation heights. Do either of you know what the height proposed, the maximum height proposed on this is?
No, but we can look
Yeah,
at the original staff report, which should cover the.
Or we can ask the applicant
consistency.
too, because I'm sure they have that number off
Yeah.
the top of their head. But I think it's close to 50, if I remember.
Yeah, while staff looks up the answers to those questions, let's take a quick 5-minute recess. Okay. It is 6:11. We'll reconvene at 6:16. All right, so staff had a few minutes to circle back on some answers to some questions, I think.
Yeah, so we looked up the plans in our archive, and they did submit floor plans, elevations, site plan as part of the preliminary application.
Great, thank you. That completes my questions. Any final questions for staff? Nope. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move into clarifying questions for the applicant. And we'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Tarnay.
I guess I don't know who it's to, but to the applicant. You're saying that these are geared towards the Truckee resident. How will you ensure that they are affordable to people who are earning wages available in Truckee?
If somebody wants to go ahead and step up to the podium and turn the microphone on.
So are you talking about the affordable units? Just
Nope,
the market
you're
rate
saying-
units?
Yeah, you're saying the
So-
entire thing is workforce housing units geared
Correct.
towards Truckee residents. I wrote down your quote from you guys.
Sure, and it's geared towards Truckee residents by having a locals preference and also restricting short-term rentals, exactly what we did in phase 2. Just to kind of clarify some of the history of Jorga Ranch specific plan, 72 units were designed to be or slated to be in the RMW parcel. The reason for that was overall at full build out, if they built out the maximum commercial industrial, it generated a use of 82.6 workforce housing units. We set aside an RMW parcel to make sure that the rest of the development didn't have to take care of workforce housing. So it was going to be on the RMW parcel at 72 units. So the way that happened was they were all market rate units, and they were going to be affordable by design, meaning they were going to be no short-term rentals, and they were going to be under 1,000 square feet. So that's just some clarification of what the RMW parcel was. So what we have before you today is 109 workforce housing units, 79 of which are under 1,000 square feet. 16 of them are one bedroom that are going to be about 650 square feet. 63 of them are going to be two bedroom, which are under 1,000 square feet in the 950 square foot range. So we have 79 units that are under 1,000 square feet, which is what was intended in the RMW parcel of 72 units. So that's how they're going to be affordable. And they're workforce housing units because they're restricted. There's no short-term rentals. We're happy to restrict them from being short-term rentals. And we're going to give first priority to Truckee residents.
And how long does that locals preference last?
I think it's indefinitely, the locals' preference. You mean how long do they sit before they could be rented to somebody else? I believe that's 90 days. If they go unrented and there's no demand for locals, then certainly they would go beyond locals. But I believe that's 90 days. But I'd have to. Is that right? 90 days.
So that's any time an apartment opens, or that is just the first 90 days that you are leasing apartments?
Anytime that apartment opens.
Somebody looks like he's standing up and wants to say something.
Thanks, Rob. I didn't really want to come up. My name's Art Chapman, representing the project. The concept behind what we have proposed to the town and the staff is for the first 60 to 100 days when the project opens, it would be offered exclusively only to people who live in the school district boundaries. There would be no rentals at all, leases at all, less than 6 months to eliminate the ski lease issue. Once the project hopefully is full, when vacancies occurred, there'd be two waiting lists. The first waiting list would be to go to people who, again, work within the school district boundaries who want to come into the project, and they would get preference over somebody from outside the area who wanted to fill a vacancy. So we have tried to structure it so priority is given initially and an ongoing basis to people who work within the school district boundaries.
Okay, so, and you're agreeing with what he said, that you said 60 to 100 days, he says 90 days. If an apartment is open, that people move out, and then you will have it open for just locals.
Let's assume that we start construction on phase 2 in the spring. That's the plan. And phase 3 would follow immediately thereafter. Within 60 to 90, 100 days to the opening of any particular building, it would be given on a priority basis to people who live within the school district boundaries. If there isn't enough demand from the local community, the lender would require us to open it up to other people. But it will be restricted to people who work within the district. Once it's full, let's say 2 years from now, and there's turnover, there will be 2 waiting lists for people to get in, one local and one outside, and the locals will be given priority out of people who don't work within the school district to fill vacancies.
Okay, how are they given preference? I mean, it's just you take everybody off the locals list before you even get to the non-locals list?
Yes, basically, yes.
Okay.
And we have also agreed to have oversight. We've offered to have the local Mountain Housing Council and others to look at the procedures and to actually have oversight on the process. As some of you know, JMA does have other business in the community, and we are acutely aware of the problem of the lack of workforce housing, and we need to meet it. And it is frankly, a major impediment to the continued economic growth of this area until we meet it. It's a big problem.
Okay. I see that we're making it available to them. I don't see that it's necessarily affordable to folks who are earning wages here, but I will move on from that. I'm a little disappointed that of the 24-inch diameter trees, which are referred to as distinctive trees, we are removing more than we are remaining. There are 30 of the trees above 24 inches or 24 inches and above that are being removed, and 23 that are remaining. In these pictures, this rendering right here at the bottom, it's a shock because there's a lot of very tall trees there right now, and that is not very tall trees.
So Commissioner Tarnay, it sounds like we're moving into deliberations here.
no.
We're still in clarifying questions for the applicant.
I guess my question is there any way you can save any more big trees?
Well, we certainly have looked at that hard. I can tell you that we are replacing a lot more trees than we are taking out to accommodate the development. But I'm certainly no expert in that. I think maybe Sean, the landscape architect, Laura's not here tonight, but I can tell you we spend an awful lot of time trying to preserve and keep as many trees as we can. You want to try?
Thanks, Art.
Is there any way to make a tree island where this big clump is in your parking lot?
We always try to save as many trees as possible, especially larger trees. On this, I think it's about 50-50 on trees removed and trees retained. As Art mentioned, we're replanting more trees than we're removing. From this rendering that you saw from the highway, that's actually an area that has almost no trees between the trail and the parking area. So we're removing almost nothing at that location in that rendering. But certainly a project like this that provides the type of housing that we're providing, we're going to lose some trees. So we're replanting as many as we can.
Any follow-up questions, Commissioner Tarnay?
Not right now.
Commissioner Riley, clarifying questions for the applicant.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few questions. So let's see. My first question is, I read that, and I think the architects said that one of the people lives here in Truckee, but are you from San Diego? I know it looked like the firm was from San Diego. You're from San Diego, so you're part of the design team. You could come up. I want to find out how our San Diego architects are addressing snow country.
Okay.
I have issues with snow shed, the roof lines, sun exposure, things like that. And I'm just curious because I know in the past, I've been doing this for a long time, 20-something years. When we get people from other communities that aren't, familiar with mountain topography, snow impacts, intense sun, we sometimes have inconsistencies that can occur. So,
my name's John Thatch. I'm the senior partner, one of the founding partners of the firm. We have multiple offices, including here in Truckee, where I reside. I live in Tahoe Donner at 6,600 feet, so I'm very aware of snow.
Yeah.
And I think we've carefully looked at how the entries to the project work, where things are going to happen. So I am very aware of snow. I do a lot of shoveling myself. So, and I made sure it doesn't fall on my deck and things like that. So we're very aware. I've had houses, we've been participating up here for over 30 years. Had housing up here for 30 years, so I'm very aware of the snow and making sure things are arranged with your snow plow and everything else. So, and where the roofs are. So I think we've been very careful how that's been designed.
Yeah, so with that, I did notice some of the elevations seem to have a roof on the fourth story that doesn't appear to be impeded by anything, and I'm curious how that is being addressed.
As you can see, we have some, impediments on the roof edges as far as snow and things.
Oh, yeah, I don't know that.
Okay. Well, yeah, the renderings as far as the scale, but those are planned. You'll be seeing those in again, later phase when we get into working drawings. We have not, like what we have on phase 2.
So are you saying you're going to have, like the
Snow fence.
Thank you. The fencing, like what are the plans to address the snow load that would, in my mind, be a safety
We've had a
hazard?
consultant working with us as far as what the fencing on those edges are. So we've been very careful on all of them. So you're right, we are 4 stories. So we've taken been very cautious of how they're going to be designed. And a lot of that's taken account in what we've done in phase 2 for the working drawings on that.
Okay. So I guess then I want to direct to staff because we're looking at a project that is still under design and consideration in terms of addressing these issues. How do we reconcile that?
I mean, I don't think it's our understanding that we're working with a project that's still under design. If changes come to us with a building permit submittal, then we'll evaluate those to determine if they're consistent with what potentially gets approved tonight. If they're not, then we would go through a process either to bring the project back into compliance or we would bring it back to the commission if it rises to a level that it kind of falls outside of our discretion.
Okay.
We're planning for all those things as far as what's happening on the roofs. Again, I've lived here for a long time. I'm very aware of the snow.
Yeah, right. It's one thing to be addressing, residential design, which can be very impactful. I'm well aware of that, especially in Tahoe Donner. I'm in the banana belt. It's not quite so bad in Glenshire. But when we're looking at these buildings, very large buildings that are, receiving a lot of snow and have metal roofs, it makes me concerned that that's something we address now rather than later. Let's see, I had, and then my other question kind of from an architectural standpoint is, I don't feel that there are adequate shading devices on this project, specifically the south and west face. Minimal roof overhangs, and then really nothing kind of on the windows to address that solar gain. Would you mind speaking to that?
I think we have, places where we are shading. I would, say, yes, we're not doing all of them. But I think, again, bringing, I guess I look at, again, my house and living up here is wanting to bring sun in a lot of the times, not just always blocking it. It does get, as far as, it's nice to have the sun come through in the winter. My house, per se, is we're south facing. And as far as, how it's worked out real well for us as far as, especially in the winter months. as far as how it works. So those are some of the things where we have some areas where we have some deep areas, them porches or roofs, things like that, or terraces. I think we look at those as the areas that we're really looking at as far as protecting those areas more than, say, just all the windows.
Is there going to be air conditioning in these units?
Yes, there is.
They're okay. Because that's been a big change over the last like 10, 15 years. The homes, the newer homes are all
Well, the
getting
new-
AC and,
Well, it's also the new homes with California Title 24, the insulation values and everything else. They're pretty amazing what goes into these homes now.
yeah, my house doesn't have AC and we have to shut it down in the summer, close all the blinds because it gets baking hot and I don't even have
Yeah,
that
the
much
new requirements
glass.
as far as windows, insulation, things that you
Yeah.
do with homes are quite a bit different.
Yeah.
But this project will have air conditioning.
Okay, I appreciate that, though I know there's energy issues. Commissioner Tarnay may want to talk about that. I want to go back to, maybe it's Rob or Art, I want to talk more about the use of the workforce housing. It's been used so loosely. My interpretation has always been it would be geared towards people making a living in the service industry of our community, which is not a high-end income generator. It's a lot more now than it ever has been, but still probably not necessarily at the point where we can be charging market rate rents and house people. So I would maybe Rob or Art could get up and address some more questions about being open to, not having this restriction on the time. We went through this with Coburn Crossing. I can't say that was totally effective. I think there were a lot of, ways to kind of get out of the requirement. Things weren't totally transparent. I would hate for that to happen with this project, especially because it's being termed this workforce housing locals project. And I would want it to be living up to that name. Would there be more of an openness to expanding that timeline of whether that's 60, 90, 100 days to something more, making it 100% restricted to people who work in the TTUSD boundaries?
Well, you've got to remember, you've got to finance this project, and there's no lender in the world that's going to agree to put up a $40 million construction loan and have a project empty because there's no demand. So there has to be a balance. That's why we have proposed, 30 to 90, 100 days initially. But if there is no local demand, the lender is going to require that it be leased, or else you're not going to build it.
And what is your thought on that about local demand? Because I'm assuming you believe that there is more than enough demand to house your project with the local workforce.
I don't think there's any question about it. I think the Mountain Housing Council report of a couple years ago, coupled with the Lake Tahoe Prosperity Center report that just came out that included Truckee, basically that was done under an Economic Development Administration grant. I sit on the steering committee for it. That basically determined that the median income in the Tahoe Basin and Truckee is $53,000. That's fallen a little bit in the last 6 months. And the average cost of a house is $1,050,000 in that same area. That means from 10,000 feet that nobody works here can afford to live here. There is incredible demand. I think the Mountain Housing Council has called it out. Last year, to give you an example, one of the major ski areas in this area that happens to have a national footprint suffered a 20% decline in their stock as a public company because of the perception that their service level had gone down and people weren't visiting. It wasn't service level. They couldn't afford to hire anybody. And therefore the service level did decline. It's a major issue facing our area here. I think there's probably demand as far as we can see into the future for this kind of a housing.
So that being said, and I don't disagree with you. I mean, the this general plan update process we've been in for the last 4 years has really highlighted this desire to build and densify and create as much housing as we can to address this need. And so I'm struggling with, I do respect what you're saying about the financing and the bank, and that's that side, and then the piece of the local serving need. Have you consulted with the entities, with the, the Joint Powers Working Group, the JPA, the airport, the hospital, the school district? I would imagine if there was that this coalition would perhaps be a funding source so that you could guarantee this housing be 100% local focus. Because I find it very easy, and we've seen this time and again, where there's this beautiful intent, and then it's like, yeah, but it's so easy because the Bay just is like eating stuff up like nobody's business. And so then we lose out, and then we're back to square one, and we're like, oh gosh, we still need we need housing. The hole just keeps being emptied, and we keep filling it. It gets emptied. So that's where I wonder if there's opportunities where we could try to put you in a more secure position by having additional funding or partners at the table, so that this really could be a win-win and a local serving project.
A short answer to a long question. Yes, we have talked to them. And we're trying to provide, it's very difficult to determine what an affordable housing rate is when you don't know when the cost of the product is. If I could give you an example, if you take the $9 million worth of public improvements that have been imposed on this project and divide it by the number of units we're building, we have increased the cost of a unit $50,000. Okay, that's a problem. And so one of the things we're looking at, and we've talked to the staff about that, is master leasing. Major and small employers in the area, where we can master lease units to them on a long-term basis. Instead of being able to quote a specific rate, what we're doing is quoting a return on cost, which is quite innovative, and it's not a exorbitant rate. So what we're trying to do is align all of our interests by reducing the cost of creating these units to the extent possible, while still providing decent, safe and affordable housing, and renting to them at a rate that is affordable, okay, and allows us to go forward with the project. And that's how we are actually proceeding, and in discussions with employers in Truckee and in the school district boundaries.
I'm happy to hear that, and thank you for sharing. I don't think we were made aware of that. I had one more question. It's really, I think, for the architect or the design team, related to more shading with the parking lots. One of the policies or in the Jurger Ranch specific plan ties to screening of the asphalt or the shading, and that there would be a breakup of asphalt. I wrote a note, now I'm not sure I can find it. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to increase the landscaping within the parking area. Don't all rush up there.
I wish the landscape architect was here to answer, but
Yeah.
obviously one of the requirements in final design is to meet shade calcs for parking, and so we're obligated to design this to meet all the shade calcs within the parking areas. I know great care was taken to screen the parking, especially from the highway side. So I can say we're definitely committed to meet all of the standards, and as far as going above and beyond, I mean, sure, we want to make a really nice project, and we have a really good local landscape architect, Laura Mello, that's working on this, and so we'll definitely take that into consideration about putting as much landscaping as possible within the parking areas.
Okay, appreciate that.
Sure.
That's all for now.
Okay, I just have a couple questions. I'm I'm curious to know about the daycare amenity. How's that work?
As in,
I mean, so the question was posed to staff earlier on how the daycare the floor space was calculated on the daycare as not a commercial space, but as a residential space because it's an amenity, so it's not commercially viable or commercially open to the public. And this is really just out of curiosity.
Sure.
Typically, you know, in the homeowners association, you pay in, and your HOA dues covers the amenities, whether it be a pool, a spa, you know, fitness facility, snow removal, whatever. I'm just kind of curious about it.
We wanted to build community-wide daycare. The staff informed us that the specific plan didn't have daycare as an eligible use, and when the specific plan was adopted, the Airport Advisory Committee had concerns, which we find unusual since the airport has built a playground adjacent to a runway at the airport. We would bring this issue back. Everybody has told us from the school district, the hospital district that they want daycare. We've had people who work for the town tell us that. We are building a community building in Phase 3 that was designed in part to meet state law in terms of childcare facilities, and we still want to have more. We do not understand the inconsistency between not having a larger daycare that's open to the public and the airport building a playground beside a runway.
Fair enough. Well, my other question is just in regard to the lease terms. You've got 6 months as a minimum lease. Is that intended to try and service like J1s and seasonal workforce for ski resorts and things like that?
No, it was actually intended to discourage ski leases. That's why we did it. Where people who wouldn't come up and rent an apartment for 3 months to ski during the wintertime.
Gotcha. Okay. Follow-up question? Okay, Commissioner Tarnay, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so I was able to pull up my numbers of the, back of the napkin calculations here. And at 60% of the area median income, if you have a family of 4 with 2 wage earners, they each have to earn less than $14.20 per hour. We don't really have those jobs here. I mean, this is for staff and you as well. Can we change that from 60% area median income to 80% area median income, where you can at least make, $19, $20 an hour?
We'd certainly come back to the staff with a recommendation to do so. Nobody wants these units to go vacant, and I agree with you, it's a major problem. When McDonald's is paying $22 an hour for somebody to stand at the stands, the day of us paying $12 an hour is over. You're already seeing that in the ski resorts already this year, substantial increases, but totally agree with you, Commissioner. And if that occurs, we'll be back in front of you.
Okay, so you're saying that if you cannot rent them at the 60% area median income, you will come back and try and change it to the 80%?
Yeah, we don't want the units to go vacant, and there's been other problems we're aware of where people have come in from outside the area. We don't want that either. We want this to work for local people, and if the county median incomes are too low, and I agree with you. You can't hire people to work at those rates here. We'll come back in.
Okay, and you quoted a number of a median income of $53,000, but the Nevada County area median income, I don't know if you're quoting single person or 4-member family, but it's significantly higher than that right now, the 100%.
I picked up this number at an update of this economic development model 2 days ago, where an economic consultant from San Francisco had come in and updated the number. I'm sure it's not what the county is reflecting right now or HUD is using, but that was just the most recent median income that they came up with earlier this week as part of the study. I'm not sure what the county median income is today.
I have a little question to ask you. Is there a way we can bring up the plan view of the, this is nothing huge, but there's one access off of building J to the bike path down there. And I'm wondering if there's any way to create little extensions on either end, because you're just going to get people going across there anyway, across the dirt. Does that make sense? When people are going this way, they're not going to come from here and go down and go out, or come from here and go
We'll
out.
certainly look at it and with staff, and if we mutually agree it's warranted, we'll propose it.
And then I have a quick question for staff as well. It might be different in this because it's a specific plan area, but in our regular code, don't we have a requirement for sort of tree islands between a certain number of parking spaces, 7 spaces, and then a tree island or something?
Yeah, the landscape standards in the development code do have some requirements for landscape interior landscaping for parking lots.
And this specific plan has less requirements?
I'd have to go back and look at but like I said, there's very few standards in this specific plan. I don't remember that being one of them.
Can we check and make sure? Because there's, rows of 20 parking spaces in a row without
I
any
saw
lights.
it. I saw there were standards for landscaping. That's what I was referencing.
Those could have been under the guidelines, but I can check if you want me to.
I'll check too.
Yeah, I mean, the general requirement that's listed in the table for the regional commercial zone says as required by Development Code Chapter 18.40, which is our landscaping chapter in the Development Code. There are some guidelines specific to landscaping in here, but they're guidelines.
And so then it refers to our code, and our code, does it have a specific requirement of, or we're not sure?
It does. It's based on the number of parking spaces that are there, but also allows you to group so that you can better ensure that whatever landscaping is survives too. So a lot of times that looks like more bulb outs at the ends of areas that are larger versus having them all put kind of in between parking spots. And that's just been how we've applied it.
Okay, and then he was talking about the certain percentage of shade required on the parking. Do we?
I don't think we know what that's
No,
in
we don't know what
reference
that
to.
is.
I don't think that's a development code standard.
Page 32 in the specific plan, it's a CG-3 parking lots with 50 or more parking spaces shall be divided into separate areas by landscaping or walkways of at least 10 feet in width or by a building or group of buildings. Is that what you were wondering about?
That is. It says it shall be. That shall should be
Yeah, it's a requirement.
not a guideline, but a
So we-
subjective standard.
So what we have with the application is a preliminary landscape plan through the building permit. There's a condition of approval that requires us to review the final landscape plan to make sure it complies with all town standards. So that's something that we would typically get into the details on as part of the building permit process.
Okay, so do we have any more clarifying questions for the applicant?
I have one last one.
One last question.
Yes, I had Art. I'd love for you to come up. I should have asked this before, but it slipped my mind. I'm curious about the subleasing. What was the intent on the subleasing? There's a restriction of no less than 31 days.
It was actually the ski lease issue.
Yeah.
So we didn't have tenants who were leasing over the Christmas holidays
Yeah.
while they went and visited. So we wanted to limit it to no less than 31 days to avoid that problem.
Would you be open to removing the sublease exemption, like caveat?
Prohibiting subleases
Is that not
entirely?
allowed?
Is that
Yeah,
what you're suggesting?
yeah.
I was just trying to help you clarify your thought.
Yes, I wasn't sure if you knew some legality that you were weighing.
think
or
that-
not.
I don't deal with rentals.
Okay.
I think that'd be very difficult to do. And again, you run into financing issues with people who have illnesses, relocation, that kind of a issue. I think it might be difficult to lease the units in the first place.
Could we expand the time period so it's not a roughly a month, but something more? If you were going to sublease, it's 6 months or 4 months or.
How about 45 days?
I mean, I just, again, it's just the all of the ways that people are finagling, even including kind of what I think Susie was alluding to, and you referenced that while there is this great need throughout the entire state, bringing people in from other jurisdictions who need housing isn't helping our housing need. So I'm looking to plug as many holes as we can from that leakage. But we don't have to
Well,
debate that right now.
he threw out a 45-day instead of 31.
31.
Sounds very
Yeah.
reasonable.
I think we'll
to
take
me.
it.
60 days?
45, it's a good idea.
Okay, you said that was your last question. Did you mean it?
I did.
Okay, great.
Can I have one question? But
One
for
last
staff.
question.
This, they can't do short-term rentals here anyway, correct? Because we have capped our short-term rentals. That is not something that is up to them.
Short-term rentals are prohibited in multifamily housing at this point in the town of Truckee.
That's correct.
And even if it weren't, it would have been capped anyway, and they don't have the permits for it, correct?
Well, for non-multifamily, there's waiting lists for new residential.
Thank you, both of you.
Okie dokes. So we've got all of our questions out of the way. Let's go ahead and move into public comment. Alexis, what do you got for us?
The bumper stickers coming soon. I heart meetings. Alexis Aller, Mountain Area Preservation. Thank you. A lot of my questions were answered through the presentation, the questions. Mountain Area Preservation has a long history weighing in on Planned Community 3, also known as Jerger Ranch or Soaring Ranch. We were very involved with the zoning and really advocating for compatible land uses, really looking at the site as well as open space opportunities. So this is an important piece. This is the third phase, which I remember looking at it during the phase 2 proposal, I think. Anyway, so we've looked at this for some time, and I think the number one piece really is the local workforce housing priority and that prioritization, which Art and Rob have spoken to. And I just think, you know, the one piece, I think Commissioner Riley said it, and I think a lot of us are feeling this way, is we don't want to we want to make this project iron proof, right? We don't want to have leakage. We don't want to have people creating ski leases. And so how can the town legally provide that assurance for this local prioritization? That would be my one request, is for the town, for staff to clarify how we can ensure that these 109 units have the local workforce priority, and make sure that we don't have to request an audit for a year to make sure that the housing units went to the right people. So I think that's the big question for Mountain Area Preservation, and we've been involved with every phase as well as the specific plan amendment process last year. So, you know, it's 5 years of looking at projects now. And I think that the applicant has addressed some of that priority, but I want the community, I want to feel good that these units can't just be going to anyone. That, I think that's our big crux here, and it's been the theme in the general plan update, right? Let's make sure that the housing goes to the need. So thank you for your time again, and thank you for your service.
Thanks, Alexis. Okay, anybody else want to make a public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment, and we'll give staff an opportunity, or the applicant an opportunity, to respond to that public comment should they choose to.
Sure, we're happy to. I mean, the short answer is that we cannot guarantee that all 109 units will be made available to local workforce. What you've heard tonight is not in the affordable housing plan, and we can only enforce the 24 units that are part of the town's inclusionary housing program. So that concern you heard from Alexis, I mean, we can again focus on the 24, but the remainder of the units are not part of the town's deed restricted program.
Thanks,
Wait, it's
Jenna.
not part of the inclusionary housing program, it's part of the density bonus.
Correct.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move into deliberation.
May I follow up with that, just to clarify?
Sure.
So the density bonus units are required to be local serving? No, just affordable. So we can get the bust in, people from, the Valley, and kind of like what's happening at Coldstream and the Artist Lofts. I mean, can the applicant do the local priority for all the units, and have parameters around that?
I mean, the applicant can voluntarily choose how they would like to rent their units, but we do not have a mechanism outside of the 24 that are part of the town's affordable housing program to have any kind of enforcement mechanism at our disposal.
Okay.
Do we have the discretion to make those available to the 80% AMI instead of the 60% AMI?
I don't think we do, because it's under the state density bonus law.
Thank you.
But may I follow up?
Sure.
So I'm again wanting some clarification. How is it that we're able to do this kind of locals below market rate housing rental program, but we can't assign housing to be for locals? We can give homeowners money to rent to locals, but we can't assign units to be local.
I think
deed
that's
restriction.
through our voluntary town housing program, where we have a tax measure that directs monies to how we would like to use them. It's not a requirement that someone restrict their home in that fashion that we're able to impose upon them. It's something that someone comes to us and says, I'd like to be part of this program, and then we essentially fund that decision. This is different. This is a regulatory decision that we would be making tonight. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I get there's kind of the voluntary, like the homeowner is voluntarily making this choice, and they are receiving a financial benefit to do that.
I mean, what I will say, because I hear the concern that the commission has about the affordability level, is that the applicant doesn't want to see these units vacant any more than the rest of the community does. And so if they're finding that that income level isn't meeting a need, they're either going to go find people, or they're going to come back and ask to have that be different. So I think that's just part of this, is that they're not going to build a project that doesn't financially make sense. So if that income level is just not quite meeting the need, then they're going to adjust. I will also say that, 60% is a, lower income for us, but it isn't necessarily that you have two incomes in one household. Mm-hmm. When you look at Coldstream Commons, we have people who are disabled, who are on fixed income, they're retired, they're veterans. There's a variety of reasons why people's income are lower. So I would just caution that it's not necessarily fair to equate these affordability levels to sort of a two-income household that might look more similar to what we know and might have, jobs that make a certain amount of money. There are a lot of reasons why people end up in those income categories. And I think as a community, we just need to be cautious that we're not making judgment about those community members.
Yeah, my concern is not about I hear what you're saying, the judgment or who makes what kind of income. My concern is real, the firsthand people telling me on the street, and I have friends who live at the Artist Lofts and people at Coldstream who are concerned with how that need is being met, and it's not with the Truckee Tahoe local, workforce. That's my concern, is addressing that need, and if the income plays a role, then we need to address that. But again, I think it behooves us to be working with the development team to really try to make as strict and delineated language as we can, if that's our consensus regarding who we ultimately want to be living in these units.
Unfortunately, I think there becomes a point in time where we're starting to straddle the fine line between having good intentions and then wandering into discrimination territory. So, and then as well as intended as the state laws that come out of Sacramento are for density bonuses and stuff, there's certain things that are outside of our purview. So, I mean, I think that to a certain extent, we have to take the applicant, at what they say, and their intentions sound like they want this to be for local workforce, but there's only so much we can stray from our lane before we really risk getting in trouble.
Well, and I just want to clarify, that's why I asked if we had that discretion. If he came to you and said, I am not able to rent these out at 60 AMI, can I do it? That's a voluntary thing. Can I do it at 80? I was asking if we had that discretion. It sounds like Jenna says no, but it sounds like Danielle says yes.
I think there's a difference between if they come to us and make a request versus what can we impose on them.
No,
and
no,
what's
yeah.
legal.
I wasn't talking about imposing. I was talking about how they were saying
Yeah,
right
we're
here.
talking if they request, yeah. I mean, they can always come in and amend their project and request that.
Okay, and that's what I was asking when I asked if we had the discretion, not to impose it.
Yeah,
but
I thought you were asking, Jenna, when we were before, thought you were asking if that was something we could require.
thank you for letting me clarify.
Okay, we ready to move into deliberation here?
Yes.
Fabulous. Commissioner Tarnay, do you agree? No, yeah. All right. Okay, so let's do a quick straw poll. How are you feeling about this project tonight, Commissioner Tarnay? Just a high-level question. Yes, I'm interested in approving this project. No, I'm not interested. Maybe we need to dissect it a little bit further.
I'm conflicted.
You're conflicted. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Riley.
Yeah, I'm conflicted for a number of reasons. I kind of, from the high level, I'm not totally sure there's a ton we can do for the big picture issues that give me heartburn.
And what are those?
Okay. I look at this as urban development. I look at this as a Davis-style development. It's concrete jungle. I look at this as, a very high-density housing development. And I don't feel it follows the specific plan regarding small-town mountain character, which is kind of one of the first paragraphs in the plan. That's, I get it's subjective. So there's kind of the ground we can stand on and the ground that is just going to slip out from underneath us. I feel like this is a harbinger of what's going to come, specifically with the general plan update. So if this is what we want all along Donner Pass Road Gateway, then go with the increased development and densities and design and lack of ability to weigh in. That gives me heartburn and pause. Again, not just Donner Pass Road Gateway, but Donner Lake, Glenshire, West River Street. I think this would be very indicative of what we would see in those locations. That being said, I don't really think we have a ton of ground to stand on to deny this project. What I would like to have some say in would be things like more roof articulation, a deeper roof overhang, shading devices on windows that are west-facing and south-facing that don't have adequate, protection from the sun. That's something that gives me pause that I think we could have an impact on. More landscaping in the parking lot. I think there's there's a policy to support that, because I do have concerns about the amount of exposed asphalt. That was something I weighed in on phase 2 as a member of the public. And also the locals' preference and really solidifying that if this is going to move forward, I want to do everything I can to make sure that these units are housing our local workforce and not just, ways for people who are savvy to use them as ski leases or vacation units. So that's pretty much where I'm at.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Tarnay. What gives you heartburn?
First of all, I'm uncomfortable. I feel like this project, frankly, was slid in under the wire, knowing that the workforce housing requirement was a typo. That doesn't feel very karmic to me. It's what happens when you've got a lot of money and manpower and can get your plans in before they get amended. I find it interesting that you're comparing them to Gateway. It's funny, this brings in both of your comments and the first comment over here that this is a mixed-use walkable development. There's nothing walkable here outside of that development. I mean, there's parks, but it's probably biking distance. Gateway is actually walkable to hospitals and schools. This is walkable to the store that's there. So we're stretching the definitions there a little bit. Yeah, so that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. The term workforce housing units makes me uncomfortable because there's nothing that guarantees this will be, or that even aims to being affordable to that workforce. And again, I tend to think of workforce as service industry or teachers or policemen or, I don't know, folks that are now commuting in from Reno. So those are the things that make me uncomfortable. I do feel slightly better about some of this, that they are smaller units. Affordable by design, though, isn't. It's like jumbo shrimp. It doesn't actually exist, or it's a contradiction, oxymoron, there's the word. And so that's, and the 60% AMI makes me uncomfortable. I do understand that we have a need for folks who are on a fixed income. Possibly we could make a priority for seniors who are on fixed income, but.
Well, I came in with heartburn about the roundabout, but now that I understand it more clearly, I feel like I feel good about it. So what we need to do is figure out what our path forward is going to be here tonight.
Can I throw in about the roundabout?
Sure.
Yeah, Nikki, you were there, weren't you? I mean, weren't we all there at the last general plan update meeting where Nevada County put in a comment, Nevada County Transportation Environmental something, put in a comment that a double lane roundabout in this location is not recommended. I kind of wish it weren't funded. I like roundabouts, but double lane roundabouts are terrible for pedestrians and they're terrible for bicyclists. And this is a key connection to the bike park. A double lane roundabout in this location is terrifying. Also, I go in and out of here in a school bus, and they're also terrifying in a school bus. So I just want to weigh in quickly about roundabouts that they don't. So Nevada County does not prefer that because there are better ways with traffic lights to give preference to buses. In roundabouts, it's everybody's equal. In traffic lights, you can give preference to buses in certain ways. So.
Okay, so what we need to do is figure out how we're going to move forward on this issue here tonight. So our options are to have a motion to approve or deny, or I mean, that's really about it. I mean, I don't see any reason why we would continue this, but there's a couple different ways things could go. So I guess, Commissioner Riley, your comment, one of the comments you made was that you don't see any reason why we would be able to deny this project.
Yeah, I don't know that we legally can deny the project. We are allowed to have more than one hearing, at least per SB 330. We can have up to 5 hearings until it becomes a financial burden for the applicant, or they are able to recoup money or, fine the town. But I believe we can bring the project back if we want to address some design issues. Yes, is that, I'm interested in seeing some shading devices. I'm interested in seeing the roof overhangs.
You've made that clear.
Okay, thanks. I'm just telling the staff, are those things that could come back to us at another review?
If there's things that you feel like you could condition, that would be changes that the applicant's willing to agree to in the resolution, might be a way to address those concerns without needing another hearing. But you're right, there are 5 hearings total available.
I'm sorry.
After tonight.
Mm-hmm. Right. This would be one of 5.
We missed a subject as well about the daycare, and I'm wondering if that's just a single room daycare. Would there be a way to do a small daycare in more than one building? Is there a way to accommodate the need for daycare in 109 apartments. I feel like it's going to be more than 14 kids in 109 apartments. Am I overestimating?
So my assumption is that a commercial daycare is not an allowed use in that zoning because it's not allowed under the club. What Nevada County Transportation Commission said was they could have a larger daycare. There would need to be conditions placed upon the project that would require additional review and conditioning by them. And we would need to amend the specific plan to allow it as an allowed use. So that's a different process than just approving this project with it as a residential amenity.
That really gives me heartburn that it's safe enough to have 196 residents, but not 15 children. I just don't, I can't do the mental gymnastics in order to make that work in my head.
Yeah, and that's the threshold they created for just it being permitted without any conditions. They're not saying that you couldn't do something else. It would just be more of a process to do that, and along with amending the specific plan, which, as we all know, is a process.
I'm sorry, the specific plan prohibits daycares here?
It's not an allowed, a commercial daycare is not a permitted use in the CR zone. So if there was interest in having a larger daycare that's open to the public in that zoning, then the specific plan would need to be amended.
So I think some of the confusion is just that the state defines a large family daycare as 14 children or less. And so even if you were in Sierra Meadows, which we have some of those, they're larger homes and they have 14 kids. And so that's allowed in a residential zone in that case without really a lot of oversight other than the state's requirements for those.
Did you mean 14 or more?
No, for the in-home daycare.
Got it.
Yeah, it's 14 or less kids. And we don't have a lot of those in the community, but there are some. There's one in Tahoe Donner, there's 2 in maybe 3 now in Sierra Meadows.
But so we couldn't, I'm not asking about opening it up to the public. I'm still trying to assess the need for daycare at this development only. We could not have a larger than 14 child daycare without amending the specific plan. We couldn't do a use permit.
Correct. It's not an allowed use currently in the Jorga Ranch specific plan in this zone district. So if we went beyond 14, it would be considered a daycare and we would need to change the plan.
So I feel like everything that I read in the staff report was talking about the totalic, not the specific plan when it came to the daycare.
There's language in the totalic that says discourage daycare uses. So when a daycare was proposed, we approached to the NCTC staff and said, can you help us understand what this language in your document means? Can we allow a daycare at all? And they said yes if it's under 14 kids or 14 or less children. Does that help?
But now you've just told me it's not an allowed use. I am, again, clear as mud.
Right. So what we're saying is that because this is a proposed residential amenity and it's only allowed for tenants of the building, it's not considered a commercial use. It's accessory to the residential project. And we do have a way to allow that within our regulations.
So can we allow one per building?
Yes, so long as it's less than 14 total,
We
right?
would probably need to circle back with Totalic on that question, because I think our understanding is that it's limited to 14 total. That isn't a question that we asked when we had them review this request.
I mean, why does it have to be in one building or different buildings? Well, why would that be important to you?
I would like it to be in one building, but they're saying that we'd have to amend the specific plan.
No, I don't think they're saying that at all. It's proposed to have one daycare with 14 kids.
Yeah, and I don't think 14 kids is enough for 100 and
I get that, but I understand that. But
And
that's
we
not
don't
what's being
actually
brought
have a
forward.
standard for daycare uses in a residential project. So I think we're kind of looking, well, right, but what I'm saying is we don't have a a requirement that mandates the project to have a daycare facility. So I think we're kind of looking at this as maybe a bonus use, for lack of a better word.
No, and I'm not trying to mandate it either. They were saying they were trying to have a higher number of kids in the daycare, and I'm trying to figure out how to get them that.
Yeah, we'd have to go through a separate process. So I think what this does is buys them the ability to figure out how the project gets built out, who's in there, what the needs are, how many people would be interested in having a on-site childcare facility. And then from there, if they decide that 14 isn't enough, then they would come back and ask us to amend so that we could change the specific plan to make that an allowed use for the more than 14.
And then work with Detalic to
Detalic,
understand what their requirements would be for more than 14 kids. Because it sounds like there's physical hardening requirements for the buildings that would have daycares.
Which it may be difficult. I mean, we don't know that.
And that just makes me so uncomfortable that we're fine with a plane crashing into 196 residents as long as 14 children in one room don't get hit. Oh, that's terrible.
All right, let's just try and focus on what our goals are here for this evening, which is to figure out which way we're moving forward or not moving forward on this project. So, Commissioner Riley, do you have specific conditions of approval that you would like to amend with the motion, or in regards to architecture, shading?
I would like the project to come back showing some changes, and I have a list of that, of what I'd like.
Okay, so then you are proposing a continuation
Yes.
and allowing the applicant to hear your comments and come back and
Yes.
Okay, so.
But if I'm on my own in that, then, it's three people. So, do you want to hear my requests?
More than what we've, yeah, if you have
Well,
anything to add to
I-
what we've already heard, yes.
No, I don't think it's, other than, maybe, I don't know if I was clear on explicit language regarding the locals' housing preference. I could just list.
Go for it.
Yeah, then they know, then they're clear. The agreement from the development team from August 31st did list affordability at 30 to 80%. So could we say, yes, we like that, that works? Or is that not in line with the density bonus law?
We have to comply with what the density bonus law requires. I could read you the definition from the government code. Like I said, it's not super clear. It doesn't give a specific number. But if you want that language, I can read that.
Is it long and lengthy?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, never mind. I'm okay with what we had discussed earlier about there was the 60%, and then if they want to come back and try to push, move it to 80, whatever that would entail. I would like to increase the roof overhangs on all the roofs, probably by a foot. And then I'd like shading devices on the south and west facing buildings, on those that are exposed, that aren't being blocked. So like the north building, south side, probably it isn't an issue, but the southmost building and the westmost, western building. The landscaping, dividing in the parking lots, explicit language regarding locals' housing preference with no less than a 6-month lease, TTUSD boundaries, not a minimum 90-day open rental period for locals before it goes to anyone, and making sure that all the units follow this locals' preference, not just the market rate, but the affordable ones too.
And then I believe somebody had made a comment about 45 days for
the sublease.
Sublease, yep, okay.
I prefer 60, but
Commissioner Tarnay, if a motion were made tonight by somebody up here on the dais to continue this and to give feedback to the applicant team, would you have anything else that you would like to add to the feedback?
I would like the staff to figure out a way that we could accommodate the daycare need at the site. Does that make sense? If you can help them, if they have to appeal or amend the specific plan. Is there a way that we can write that in as a condition of approval?
Well, we're not suggesting a condition of approval right now. What we're deliberating is whether or not we want to see this come back and have the applicant address these concerns that we're now talking about right now.
That sounds great.
Okay, so would either one of you like to make a motion?
I do think it's worth checking in with the applicant about a continuation. Oftentimes when the commission asks to do a continuation, you check with the applicant first to see if they would rather have you take action tonight versus doing another meeting.
Great point. Mr. Chapman, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I would. It's been about 15 months since we submitted a preliminary application. We would prefer you take action tonight. Our plan would be to, if this is approved, or whether we have to appeal it to another entity, to try to commence construction on this at the end of construction on Phase 2, and to experience, quite candidly, additional delays is going to cost a lot of money, add cost to the housing. We can certainly work with Commissioner Riley in terms of the landscaping and the other issues, and commit in writing to Commissioner Tornay's concern. We will support an amendment to the specific plan, for childcare, but we would prefer you take action tonight so we can take the next steps to hopefully move this project along to approval.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so then that being said, can we, you about to say something, Danielle?
I just think that you do have some options to add some conditions. If you felt like
Just gonna ask you.
staff can work with the applicant. I mean, the things that you've raised tonight, at least specific to the roof articulation, shading, and landscaping, are things very similar to what we've already kind of looked at with Phase 2. So I feel like that's not substantially different. And Laura and I spent a lot of time with the applicant's team working through to make sure that the changes met the Planning Commission's needs for that. So I feel fairly confident that we could use a similar process with that. I think that sort of you would want to check with the applicant if you're talking about, 90 days available to locals, something different than what they propose with their project description before kind of taking that action. But this is a question for you of, can you condition these to a comfort level and take action based on those conditions?
I think the applicant was the one
applicant was
suggesting
saying
the
that,
90 days.
days.
Do we just need to have that in writing from the applicant in the housing plan?
I mean, I think if that's what they're proposing, that's fine. I just wrote that down as a comment that Commissioner Riley had. I mean, it's not enforceable.
Yeah, I guess I would ask, what is your understanding of how that would actually be implemented and or enforced under a revised condition here? Does that?
I'm asking you, is that in the current housing plan as it's written to
No.
you? And then I'm asking the applicant if they would be able to put that in the current housing plan so that at least it was in writing and would make me more comfortable.
But we still wouldn't have a mechanism to enforce it. It's not in our.
Well, it would be similar to Coburn Crossing. I guess it would be
Coburn
whoever is
has
the
a
ones.
deed
It has a
restriction,
deed
though.
restriction,
So I
right.
think back in our earlier days of affordable housing, we used to allow the applicant to propose that something like a 90-day availability period, and then that was up to them to manage and monitor. So, I mean, it's something that sounds like they're interested in doing, but it wasn't conditioned that way with our earlier projects. And we can't really enforce it.
I mean, I think what you're hearing us say is we don't have a mechanism to enforce this language as it's proposed, unless it's a deed restriction.
Can we make a condition of approval that states that the applicant will create a local housing preference program to be implemented upon rent, the opening of the rental period?
I would suggest asking the applicant if that's a condition that they would be agreeable to. Because they're the ones that are determining affordability for this project.
We actually proposed that a year and a half ago to the staff. And we did put in writing that we would, in writing, agree that we would offer initially occupancy of the units to local residents. we would agree not to have ski leases less than 6 months, that we would give preference on renewal or on vacant units to local people, and that we would offer to either the town or the Mountain Housing Council the opportunity to oversee the process and, like Coburn, submit reports to the Planning Commission and the Town Council. We offered that to you a year and a half ago.
Thanks, Art.
So I think the question the commission's asking, though, Mr. Chapman, is if you would be agreeable to them adding a condition that has those specifics.
Not at all. As I indicated, the problem is that if the world was to go to hell in a handbag and the economy was to tank and there was no local demand for the units, you could not legally enforce the locals in vacant units because lenders wouldn't allow it. It wouldn't be financeable. So we're willing to make the commitment, expose our reputation certainly to the town and the community, and put that in writing. We've offered to do that beforehand.
Okie dokes. Thank you, Art. So let's go ahead and move and make a motion here to approve this. I'll make a motion to approve this project as amended, giving the development director the authority to work through these requested changes from Commissioner Riley in regards to roof articulation, window coverings, landscaping in the island area. We would prefer it that the subleases would be no less than 45 days, and that the locals' preference be 90 days, up to 90 days for locals' preference to rent a vacant unit. Do I hear a second?
Did you mention the 45-day sublease piece?
I stumbled through it.
Yeah, I'm kind of, and 6-month lease. Okay, I could support that. And I did support Susie's exploration of, looking for daycare, ability.
I mean, I feel like that everybody is on board with that, but it's clear that needs is a separate process from what we're talking about tonight. Yeah. So is that you
Yes.
do? That's a second?
Yes.
So we're ready for a roll call vote?
Chair Gove?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tarnay?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller? I'm sorry, Riley. Do that every time. I'm sorry.
I didn't realize we were such similar entities. Yes, as Commissioner Riley.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate it. Good luck with your project. Okay, well, moving into item number 8, staff reports. Do we hear any staff reports tonight?
We will have 2 items likely on your November agenda. We will have the Tykert annual update, and then we will have, we don't know yet. Well, she said yes. Chantal, that they want to be on November.
No, I think you're talking about my project.
Oh,
For the
and
second project.
yours is tentative.
Tentative.
Okay.
Yes.
And what is it?
Parcel 2.
Parcel 2 for Soaring Ranch. We may have on for November, to be determined.
I'm sorry, what?
Whoa.
Oh, we have another project potentially on for November in the Jorga Ranch specific plan area.
Any idea what's on the radar for December?
Possibly I'm not sure what it's, the formerly known as Golden Valley School, maybe, if we can get there.
Okie dokes.
But we also don't know if we have a quorum that evening.
Right. There was some
Yeah, we may not have a
inquiries.
quorum.
Yeah, I won't be there on the 20th. I'm here before that, but.
Okay. All right, so that kind of just blurred into item 9, information items. I feel like we just covered that, essentially. That's quite all right. Yeah, we were in staff reports, but that's okay. Your staff. That was a good report. Okay, commission member reports. What have you been up to, Commissioner Tarnay?
I attended one of the REACH Code informational meetings in person. I've attended numerous candidate forums. I attended the closing of the forest fire exhibit. And I think there was other stuff, but it was all fun.
Commissioner Riley, do you have anything to report?
No, nothing.
Okay, with that, we'll adjourn to the next meeting of the Planning Commission, November 15th, 2022, 5 p.m. at 10183 Truckee Airport Road, Truckee, California, 96161.